You lowered your rating on Tesla, but you actually upped the price target. Something doesn't happen every day. Is that just kind of throwing your hands in the air?
That's right. A Tesla stock analyst who just went on TV got called out by the host for downgrading Tesla stock, but increasing the Tesla stock price target. Let's take a look.
Throwing your hands in the air saying, well, the price run up was great, but we have to kind of wait and see for what the next step is.
Just as a reminder, analysts are supposed to figure out what is going to happen instead of figuring out what has already happened.
Yeah, I think that's a fair way to look at it.
Did he just admit that he doesn't know at all where Tesla stock is going? I'm not sure, but it sort of sounds like that here a little bit.
You know, I think it goes back to, again, the idea of the multiple for Tesla has always been rich versus what people expected.
Well, we have to remember that he is an auto analyst, so I do see why that would make sense to him, but I see Tesla as a tech company mostly, and many Tesla stock investors, retail Tesla stock investors, see it the same way too, which makes it much easier to justify the multiple for Tesla stock. I think the multiple for Tesla stock should still be quite a bit higher than just almost 76. And if you are an auto analyst and you look at that PE ratio of 76, and that sounds really scary because GM has a multiple of about 6 right now, not 76.
And I think this relates to the question of how much growth should we look to in the future and what are the non-automotive opportunities in Tesla? We're willing to acknowledge that there are significant opportunities ahead. And in a market that's willing to give more credit to that, we think that that needs to be reflected in the price target.
In other words, the fundamentals did not change for Tesla, but the feelings around Tesla changed because Tesla stock went up. So we increased our Tesla stock price target. If your price targets are based on sentiment, yeah, that sort of makes sense. But if your price targets only rely on fundamentals, that does not make any sense. And I personally invest on fundamentals, not on sentiment. I stole that principle from Warren Buffett, who averaged 20% per year from 1965 to 2022. If Warren Buffett was 30, again, I think he would be buying Tesla stock left and right.
But again, the rating also, we think, has to have some connection to the fundamentals, and with still a very large question on what the floor is on margins, what is elasticity of demand. We've seen data points supporting elevated inventories, especially for Model 3. We felt that the rating needed to reflect that, hence the move to the side.
These were very interesting words that he chose to describe his downgrade. According to him, there has to be some connection between the rating and the fundamentals. Some connection, not a lot of connection, some connection, I would like to emphasize.
We've really seen a shift away from a period of EV euphoria, which really engulfed the sector the last couple of years, right? And so if you added up, for instance, all of the targets that the other Western automakers have provided on EVs, the spend targets, right? Automakers the last couple of years collectively committed to something like over $500 billion of spend on EV. And I think that part of that reflected some broader EV euphoria that was in the marketplace. But what we've seen is really a reset on some of those expectations, right? A few things have really changed in the last half year or so. One is that we've moved from a supply constrained market to a demand constrained market, right? So we used to think that demand was infinite. That's not the case anymore. Second, there used to be a wide open capital markets with open funding. That's changed. The capital markets have been shut. And then the last piece is that we've moved from a market that was willing to look past EV losses, that was willing to underwrite losses. That's no longer the case. And so as we look at some of the other automakers, for instance, we cover Ford and GM, while we think that they're still very committed to an EV future, we know this is the direction they're going. The spend and the product are all aligned with this. We think that the pace may be a bit slower than what they've communicated. Some of the volume targets are just not going to be met because they're going to proceed a bit more slowly and cautiously.
Well, I guess some of them will slowly and very cautiously approach bankruptcy. Instead, what they should do is urgently and maniacally try to run away from bankruptcy by transitioning to EVs, focusing everything that they possibly can on EVs.
We talk about Tesla as more than just a car company. Does it really fit in with this paradigm that this is something that they're also an infrastructure company? They also have that as a mode as well.
Yeah, it's a good point. And we certainly appreciate that part of the rally has been these charging announcements. We think this is a positive validation point for Tesla. We think this is positive for the industry that you're moving to a unified charging standard, and we've seen others adopt this as well. But we think for Tesla, it's still relatively a small piece of what the revenue is, right? So by 2030, we think that the Ford and GM opportunity, just given a slower rollout on EVs and volume than what they've communicated, it adds up to roughly $1 billion of potential revenue for Tesla by 2030 on the charging front. That's a nice amount, but in the scheme of where Tesla revenue is, we're at almost $300 billion of revenue. That's a third of a percentage point. So really, somewhat immaterial, but it does help to validate the Tesla approach, which is positive.
For many investors, all of these announcements to partner up with Tesla to access Tesla superchargers, that has been a sign of capitulation. It's not so much that Tesla will make money from supercharging, although Tesla will, but it's more about that, yeah, Tesla is winning. Tesla is clearly the winner here. All other companies now have to follow because there's just no other good way around this. You have to be a part of Tesla's network, otherwise you won't make as many sales. Not only would you now be losing sales to Tesla, but also to GM, Ford, Volvo, Polestar, and many more will come soon too.
Our view is Tesla is in the lead in the global race to an EV future. We think they have a significant cost lead. We think that there is even a midterm catalyst path as far as it relates to the launch of Model 2 and tremendous scale there.
Notice that he is not saying anything about the Cybertruck, nothing at all, as if it does not exist and will never exist. That is an opportunity for us Tesla stock investors, retail Tesla stock investors, to beat Wall Street. I think it would be a wise move to not own 0 shares of Tesla stock throughout the launch of the Cybertruck, and definitely, especially throughout the launch of the Model 2, or the next generation vehicle that Tesla will put out.
And we're even willing to acknowledge that that there's a large non-automotive opportunity for Tesla. But I think what we've seen shift from the start of the year is a very different picture on demand in the EV world. And what that's led to is a very different outlook on margins for Tesla than we expected, at this time last year. And so we thought that the current run-up in the stock did not reflect that.
Let's also not forget that this affected all other EV makers just as much, actually even more, because their losses were already huge and now they are going to be gigantic. And if you have to just go through the pain of bearing some big losses for some period of time, okay, yeah, well, eventually you can probably do it. But if you have to handle gigantic losses for an even longer period of time, then you just start losing hope and many will just give up. By give up, I largely mean go bankrupt or simply never be able to make profits from EVs, significant profits that would sustain the whole business.
At Tesla, we always start at a first principles approach. You don't get to say, well, we've done that for 50 years, so that's the way we're going to do it for the next 50. You have to prove everything you're doing from the ground up with, first principles of physics and mechanics, and really that's our boundary. It's like, what does physics say is the envelope? And that's as far as we'll take things. There's been a lot of talk about the rear casting and how cool it is and what it does, but one of the problems when you make big pieces of aluminum is that they warp when you heat treat them. Well, with Model Y, we actually invented our own alloy that is able to achieve super high levels of strength and durability, so that saves money, cost, energy, because we don't have to heat treat it with these giant ovens. But more importantly, keeps the part straight, and that means we don't have to machine the whole thing. From an engineering geek out standpoint, that's like one of the coolest parts of the thing is like, yeah, you can look at it and say, okay, they replaced 100 parts with 1 or 2. But really, the alloy and the material development on that was super special because we wouldn't have been able to do that without it.
This former Tesla executive said that Tesla greatly benefited from the knowledge that SpaceX has about metals. So that rear body casting is largely possible because of SpaceX. Now, good luck to all other automotive companies figuring that out without having a rocket company. So as a Tesla shareholder, I don't mind at all Elon taking a few engineers away from Tesla, using them, let's say, over at Twitter for a little while, because we as Tesla shareholders also benefit from Elon owning all of these other different companies. And YouTube wants you to watch this video next, but if you haven't finished watching this Elon Musk interview, then watch this one first. My name is Matt Posius. Like and subscribe if you haven't yet, and I will see you in the next video. Thank you so much for watching.